The night the sacred stag vanished, the kingdom lost more than a symbol. It lost the secret that had protected it for generations. The people of Eldergrove woke beneath a silent sky, unaware that something ancient had changed within the heart of their kingdom. For hundreds of years, the sacred stag had walked through the Silverwood Forest, a legendary creature believed to carry the memory and balance of the land itself. Its presence was a promise that the bond between nature, the wolves, and the people of Eldergrove remained unbroken. But on that morning, the forest was empty. The sacred stag was gone. Inside the grand halls of Eldergrove Castle, the Alpha King stood before the royal council, listening as scholars, guardians, and advisors searched for answers. Nathaniel Cross had carried the crown since a young age, and the entire kingdom looked to him for protection. He was respected for his strength, his wisdom, and his ability to lead during difficult times. Yet even the most powerful Alpha could not command the truth to reveal itself. "We have searched every record and every path surrounding the forest," one advisor explained. "There is no sign of where the sacred stag went." Nathaniel looked toward the ancient windows overlooking the kingdom. He felt something deeper than uncertainty. The disappearance was not just a mystery. It was a message. Far from the castle, in a quiet village beyond the royal lands, Emily Carter walked through the edge of Silverwood Forest carrying a small lantern. As an Omega girl, Emily had spent most of her life being overlooked. People saw her gentle nature and assumed she was fragile. They saw that she avoided conflict and believed she had nothing valuable to offer. But Emily had always noticed things others ignored. She heard the quiet changes in the forest. She saw patterns hidden in ordinary moments. That morning, while searching near the ancient trees, she discovered a single silver feather-like mark resting on the ground. The moment she touched it, a strange warmth moved through her hand. Suddenly, she felt a memory that did not belong to her. She saw the sacred stag standing beneath the moonlight, looking toward the castle. She felt no fear in the creature's presence, only a message. The kingdom had forgotten something important. Emily quickly pulled her hand away, her heart racing. She did not understand what she had seen, but she knew it mattered. When she returned to the village and shared what happened, people laughed quietly. They told her an Omega could not uncover secrets that royal scholars had failed to find. But Emily remembered what she felt in that moment. The sacred stag had not chosen the strongest person. It had chosen someone willing to listen. Later that evening, news of Emily's discovery reached Eldergrove Castle. Nathaniel was told that an Omega girl from a small village claimed to have found a clue connected to the missing sacred stag. At first, he wondered why such a message had reached him. But something about the story felt different. For the first time since the disappearance, there was a possibility that the answer was not hidden in ancient books or royal chambers. It was waiting with someone no one expected. And as Emily stepped toward the castle gates, carrying a truth she barely understood, the fate of Eldergrove began to change. The gates of Eldergrove Castle opened slowly as Emily Carter stepped into a world she had only seen from a distance. The towering stone walls, the royal banners, and the quiet presence of the kingdom's most important figures reminded her of everything she was not supposed to be. An Omega girl from a small village was never expected to stand before the Alpha King. Yet Emily continued forward, holding the small silver mark she had discovered in Silverwood Forest. Inside the Grand Council chamber, many eyes turned toward her. Some were curious, others were doubtful. The royal advisors had spent their lives studying ancient records, and the idea that an Omega could discover something they had missed felt impossible to them. Nathaniel Cross stood at the center of the room, watching Emily carefully. He did not see someone weak. He saw someone who had walked into a place filled with power and still carried the same calm honesty she had shown in the forest. "Tell me what you found," the Alpha King said. Emily took a breath and placed the silver mark on the table. "I found this near the oldest trees of Silverwood Forest. When I touched it, I saw something connected to the sacred stag." The room became quiet. One advisor stepped forward and examined the mark. "This symbol has not appeared in royal records for hundreds of years," he said. "How could you possibly know what it means?" Emily looked down for a moment. She had asked herself the same question many times. She did not have the training of scholars or the experience of royal guardians. She only knew what she felt. "I do not know why I was able to see it," she answered. "But I know the sacred stag was not simply lost. It wanted someone to understand a message. Nathaniel studied her words carefully. Many people had come before him claiming to have answers. Most wanted recognition, influence, or a place closer to the throne. Emily wanted none of those things. She only wanted the kingdom to understand what was happening. Later that day, Nathaniel invited Emily to the royal archives, where generations of knowledge had been preserved. Liam Brooks, the king's trusted beta advisor, joined them as they searched through ancient records. Together, they found stories about the sacred stag that had been nearly forgotten. It was not only a guardian of the forest. It was a keeper of memories, connected to the first promise ever made between the Alpha leaders and the people of Eldergrove. As Emily read through the old writings, she discovered something unusual. The records described a person who would appear when the sacred stag disappeared. Someone who would not seek power, but would seek understanding. Liam looked at the words in surprise. This sounds like a prophecy. Emily slowly shook her head. Maybe it is not about someone chosen to rule. Maybe it is about someone chosen to remember. Nathaniel remained silent as he listened. For years, he had searched for answers through strength, strategy, and knowledge. But now, the first real clue had come from someone the kingdom had never considered important. As evening arrived, Emily walked through the palace halls beside the Alpha King. She still felt out of place among the royal walls, but something inside her had changed. She no longer wondered if she belonged there. She wondered what other truths had been waiting for someone willing to listen. And deep beneath Eldergrove Castle, hidden among forgotten pages and ancient symbols, another secret was beginning to reveal itself. The ancient archives of Eldergrove Castle had always been a place of forgotten stories, but now they had become the center of a mystery that could change the future of the entire kingdom. Emily Carter walked between towering shelves filled with centuries of records, holding a small lantern as she searched through pages that few people had touched in generations. Beside her, the Alpha King stood quietly, watching her study each detail with careful attention. Nathaniel Cross had spent years surrounded by advisors, scholars, and warriors who believed answers could only be found through knowledge and strength. Yet the person who had discovered the first true clue was an Omega girl who had never been invited into these halls before. "You are not searching for a reward," Nathaniel said as he observed her. Emily looked up from the ancient pages. "No, I just want to understand why the sacred stag disappeared." Her answer surprised him. There was no ambition in her voice, no desire for attention, only a sincere need to uncover the truth. As they continued searching, Liam Brooks discovered a hidden section within the royal records. The pages contained descriptions of the sacred stag that had been removed from official history. According to the forgotten writings, the creature did not appear when a kingdom was at its strongest. It appeared when a kingdom needed to remember what it had forgotten. Emily carefully read the words, feeling the same strange connection she had experienced in the forest. The sacred stag was not simply a protector of the land. It was a reminder of an ancient promise. A promise that the Alpha King would always protect the balance between power and compassion. Nathaniel remained silent as he listened. Those words carried a meaning he could not ignore. For years, he had believed being a great king meant being strong enough to carry every responsibility alone. But the ancient records suggested something different. A true leader was not someone who stood above everyone else. A true leader was someone who understood the people standing beside him. As Emily turned another page, she discovered a symbol matching the mark she had found in Silverwood Forest. Beneath the symbol was a message written by the first Alpha. The sacred stag will disappear when the kingdom forgets its heart. It will return when someone remembers what strength truly means. Emily stared at the words, trying to understand their meaning. The sacred stag left because something changed, she said quietly. But it was not the forest that changed. It was the people. Nathaniel looked toward the ancient records. He knew there was truth in her words. The kingdom had spent generations protecting traditions, but perhaps they had forgotten the reason those traditions existed. That evening, Nathaniel and Emily walked through the castle gardens beneath the soft light of the moon. The distance between an Alpha King and an Omega girl seemed smaller than before. "Everyone expects me to have every answer," Nathaniel admitted. "But maybe a king is not someone who already knows everything. Maybe a king is someone willing to learn." Emily smiled gently. Then maybe the truth was never meant to be found by the strongest person. Maybe it was meant to be found by someone willing to listen. Before Nathaniel could respond, Liam arrived with another discovery. A hidden map had been found inside the archives, leading to a forgotten temple deep within Silverwood Forest. The map carried the same symbol connected to the sacred stag. Emily looked at the ancient path marked across the page, realizing their search had only reached its beginning. The mystery was no longer about finding where the sacred stag had gone. It was about discovering why it had chosen to leave, and what secret it wanted the kingdom to finally remember. The path through Silverwood Forest was quieter than Emily Carter expected. The ancient trees stood tall beneath the morning sky, their branches moving gently with the wind, as if the forest itself was remembering something from long ago. Beside her, the Alpha King walked without the usual presence of a ruler, surrounded by guards and advisors. Nathaniel Cross was not traveling as a distant king searching for answers. He was traveling as someone who finally understood that some truths could not be discovered from a throne. Liam Brooks followed behind them, carrying the ancient map found within the royal archives. Every mark on the parchment led them deeper into the forgotten parts of the forest, toward a place that had disappeared from the kingdom's records. Emily held the silver symbol carefully in her hand. Since entering Silverwood Forest, she had felt the same quiet connection she experienced when she first discovered the sacred stag's message. It was not a voice. It was not a command. It was a feeling, like the forest was guiding her towards something that had been waiting for years. After several hours of traveling, they reached a hidden valley surrounded by ancient trees and soft streams of water. At the center stood a forgotten stone temple covered in symbols matching the mark Emily had found. Nathaniel looked at the entrance with a thoughtful expression. "This place was never mentioned in any royal record," he said. Liam studied the markings carefully. Someone wanted it forgotten. Emily stepped closer to the temple walls. The moment her hand moved near the ancient symbols, a familiar warmth returned. She closed her eyes and felt another memory from the past. She saw the first Alpha standing in this same place, not wearing a crown, but standing beside the people of Eldergrove. She saw the sacred stag walking freely through the forest, carrying a message of harmony. And she understood something important. The sacred stag had never protected the kingdom because of the power of the Alpha King. It protected the kingdom because of the promise between the Alpha and the people. When Emily opened her eyes, Nathaniel noticed the change in her expression. "What did you see?" he asked. Emily looked at the ancient temple. The sacred stag did not leave because the kingdom was weak. It left because the kingdom forgot what it was built on. Nathaniel remained silent. The words were difficult to hear, but they carried a truth he could not ignore. For generations, the Alpha leaders of Eldergrove had focused on protecting their position, their traditions, and their authority. Somewhere along the way, they had forgotten that leadership was meant to serve others. Inside the temple, they discovered a hidden chamber containing ancient writings. The message was clear. The sacred stag would only return when the kingdom found someone who could restore the forgotten bond. Liam looked at Emily with surprise. The prophecy was not about a warrior or a royal bloodline. Emily read the final words slowly. It was about someone who could see beyond power. Nathaniel looked at her, realizing why the sacred stag had led them here. Emily had never searched for influence. She had never wanted recognition. She simply wanted to help. As the three of them stood inside the forgotten temple, another symbol appeared on the ancient wall. It revealed that the disappearance of the sacred stag was connected to a secret hidden within the royal family itself. Emily felt her heart grow heavy. They had found the truth behind the forest. But the greatest secret was still waiting beneath the history of the crown. The hidden chamber beneath the ancient temple revealed a truth that had been forgotten for generations. Emily Carter stood quietly beside the Alpha King, looking at the old writings carved into the stone walls. Every symbol, every message, and every forgotten record pointed toward one reality. The disappearance of the sacred stag was not a mystery created by chance. It was a reminder that the kingdom had lost something far more important than a legendary creature. It had lost the meaning behind its own traditions. Nathaniel Cross studied the ancient words carefully. As the Alpha King of Eldergrove, he had always believed his duty was to protect the kingdom through strength and careful decisions. But the message before him challenged everything he had been taught. The first Alpha had never wanted future rulers to seek power above all else. The first Alpha had wanted them to remember their connection with the people they served. Liam Brooks continued searching through the hidden records and discovered Another collection of pages sealed away from the rest. The documents described a forgotten moment in royal history. Many years ago, an alpha leader made a decision that changed the relationship between the crown and the sacred stag. Instead of listening to the ancient bond between the kingdom and the forest, the royal family slowly began focusing only on tradition and authority. Over time, the original promise faded from memory. Emily read the pages with a heavy heart. She understood now why the sacred stag had disappeared. It had not abandoned Eldergrove. It had stepped away, waiting for someone to remind the kingdom of what truly mattered. The sacred stag was never protecting a crown, Emily said softly. It was protecting a promise. Nathaniel looked at her, realizing how much those words reflected his own journey. He had spent years trying to become the perfect alpha king. He believed people needed a ruler who never showed uncertainty, someone who always had the right answer. But Emily had shown him another path. A true leader did not need to pretend to understand everything. A true leader needed the courage to listen. When they returned to Eldergrove Castle, the discovery from the temple was shared only with a small group of trusted advisors. The truth was powerful, but it needed to be handled carefully. The kingdom had followed the same beliefs for generations, and changing those beliefs would require more than a simple announcement. Some advisors struggled to accept the idea that the traditions they protected were incomplete. Others began to question why such important history had disappeared. Emily noticed the tension surrounding the castle, but she remained calm. She knew the truth was not always easy to accept. Sometimes people held on to old ideas because those ideas made them feel safe. Later that evening, Nathaniel found Emily standing near the castle gardens, looking toward the distant Silverwood forest. "You knew this journey would be difficult," he said. Emily nodded. "Finding the truth is only the beginning. Helping people understand it is the real challenge." Nathaniel looked toward the forest as well. For the first time, he did not see the sacred stag's disappearance as a loss. He saw it as an opportunity for the kingdom to remember itself. But before the night ended, Liam arrived with another discovery from the temple records. Hidden within the final pages was a message about the sacred stag's return. It revealed that the creature would not return because of a king's command. It would return when the heart of Eldergrove changed. And that meant the greatest challenge was no longer finding the truth. It was proving that the kingdom was ready to accept it. The days following the discovery beneath the ancient temple changed the atmosphere of Eldergrove Castle. The halls that once carried only the sound of royal decisions were now filled with quiet conversations and questions about the forgotten history that had finally returned. Emily Carter noticed the change everywhere she went. Some people looked at her with curiosity. Others still struggled to understand how an Omega girl from a small village had uncovered a secret hidden for generations. But Emily remained focused on one thing. The truth needed to be understood, not celebrated. Inside the royal chamber, the Alpha King stood before the council once again. Nathaniel Cross held the ancient records in his hands, knowing that the words written within them would challenge everything the kingdom believed about its past. "The sacred stag did not leave because our kingdom became weak," Nathaniel explained. "It left because we forgot the promise that created this kingdom." The council listened carefully. Some advisors accepted the message immediately, while others looked uncertain. They had spent their entire lives following traditions passed down through generations. Accepting that some of those traditions were incomplete was not easy. Emily stood beside Nathaniel, watching the reactions around the room. She understood their hesitation. Change was difficult, especially when it meant admitting that the past had not always been understood correctly. Liam Brooks placed the final records from the temple on the table. "There is more," he said. "The writings mention that the sacred stag will only return when the Alpha King remembers the original promise." Everyone looked toward Nathaniel. For a moment, the weight of the crown seemed heavier than ever. He had always believed his role was to protect Eldergrove through strength and certainty. But now he realized that leadership required something deeper. It required humility. Later that evening, Nathaniel walked through the quiet gardens with Emily. The moonlight covered the path, and the distant forest stood peacefully beyond the castle walls. "I spent years trying to become the king everyone expected me to be," Nathaniel admitted. "I thought I had to carry every responsibility alone." Emily looked at him calmly. "Maybe the strongest leaders are not the ones who carry everything alone. Maybe they are the ones who know when to listen." Nathaniel smiled slightly. Her words had become a reminder of everything he had forgotten. She never tried to stand above others. She never wanted power. She simply saw the truth when everyone else looked away. The next morning, Nathaniel made a decision that surprised the entire council. Instead of keeping the ancient records within the royal archives, he ordered that the forgotten history of Eldergrove be shared with the people. The kingdom needed to know where it came from and why the sacred stag had disappeared. As the message spread, something unexpected began to happen. The people did not reject the truth. They began to remember. They shared old stories from their families, stories about kindness, balance, and the connection between the alpha leaders and the land. Emily watched from the castle balcony as the kingdom slowly changed. But then, a new sign appeared near Silverwood Forest. The trees that had been silent for months began to glow with a gentle silver light. Liam arrived with the news, carrying a message discovered near the forest entrance. The sacred stag was not far away. It was waiting. Emily looked toward the forest, feeling the same connection she had felt from the beginning. Nathaniel stood beside her, understanding that their journey had reached a turning point. The kingdom had remembered the truth. Now they had to prove they were ready to restore the bond that had been lost. The silver light that appeared within Silverwood Forest became the hope that Eldergrove had been waiting for. For the first time in many years, the kingdom felt a connection returning between its people, its land, and the ancient promise that had once guided every Alpha King. Yet Emily Carter knew the journey was not finished. The sacred stag had left a message, but understanding that message required more than simply finding the creature. It required the kingdom to truly change. At sunrise, Emily, Nathaniel Cross, and Liam Brooks traveled toward the edge of Silverwood Forest, following the gentle silver glow that had appeared among the ancient trees. The path felt familiar to Emily, as if the forest itself remembered her presence. Nathaniel walked beside her, no longer searching for answers as a ruler demanding solutions. He walked as someone willing to learn from the truth. As they reached a quiet clearing, Emily noticed something unusual. The air felt peaceful, almost as if the forest was holding a memory from another time. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient stone covered with the same symbols they had discovered inside the forgotten temple. Emily stepped closer and placed her hand near the marking. Once again, the connection returned. But this time, the memory was clearer. She saw the first alpha standing beside the sacred stag, not as a master commanding nature, but as a guardian who respected the balance of the world around him. She saw the first promise of Eldergrove, a promise that the alpha would protect the kingdom, not because of power, but because of responsibility. When Emily opened her eyes, Nathaniel was waiting for her answer. "What did you see?" he asked. Emily looked toward the forest. "I saw why the sacred stag left. It was not looking for a stronger king. It was waiting for a king who remembered the reason he was chosen." Nathaniel lowered his gaze. Those words reached a place inside him that no one else had been able to reach. He had spent years trying to prove he was worthy of the crown. But perhaps worthiness was not measured by how much someone could carry alone. It was measured by how willing they were to protect what truly mattered. Suddenly, the silver light in the forest grew brighter. From between the ancient trees, the sacred stag appeared once again. It moved calmly through the clearing, carrying the same peaceful presence described in the old legends. Emily stood still, feeling the same connection she had felt from the beginning. The sacred stag looked toward her, then toward Nathaniel. No words were spoken, but both understood the meaning. The bond had not returned because of a command from the throne. It had returned because the heart of Eldergrove was beginning to heal. Liam watched the moment quietly, realizing that history was changing before his eyes. The Omega girl who had once been ignored had become the person who helped an entire kingdom remember itself. The Alpha King who once believed strength meant standing alone had learned that true leadership came from trust and understanding. As the sacred stag disappeared back into the forest, leaving behind a gentle silver glow, Emily knew their journey had reached a new chapter. The kingdom had found the missing piece of its past. But now they had to bring that truth back to every corner of Eldergrove and show everyone that the forgotten promise had finally returned. The return of the sacred stag brought a new feeling to Eldergrove, but Emily Carter knew that a single moment of hope could not erase generations of forgotten beliefs. The true change would come from the choices people made after learning the truth. Inside Eldergrove Castle, The great hall was filled with citizens, advisors, and families from every corner of the kingdom. For the first time in many years, the people gathered not to hear orders from the throne, but to hear the story of what had truly happened. Nathaniel Cross stood before them, holding the ancient records that had once been hidden away. The Alpha King looked across the room and saw faces that represented the kingdom he had sworn to protect. For generations, we believed strength was the foundation of our kingdom, Nathaniel said. But we forgot that strength without compassion can never create lasting peace. The hall remained quiet as the people listened. Some were surprised to hear a king admit that the traditions of the past had not always been understood correctly. Others looked toward Emily, remembering the Omega girl who had walked into the palace with nothing but a small clue and the courage to follow it. Emily stood beside Nathaniel, feeling the weight of the moment. She never imagined that her search for the sacred stag's message would lead her here. She had never wanted recognition or a place among the powerful. She only wanted to understand why the kingdom had lost something so important. Liam Brooks stepped forward and shared the records from the ancient temple. He explained how the original promise between the Alpha leaders and the people of Elder Grove had been forgotten over time. The sacred stag had never been a symbol of power. It had always been a symbol of balance, trust, and responsibility. As the story spread throughout the kingdom, something unexpected happened. People began sharing their own memories of the past. They remembered stories from their families about kindness, cooperation, and the connection between the land and the people. The truth was no longer hidden inside royal archives. It became part of the kingdom once again. Later that evening, Emily walked through the castle gardens beneath the stars. The same place that once made her feel like an outsider now felt peaceful. Nathaniel joined her quietly, looking toward the lights of Elder Grove in the distance. When you first arrived at the castle, you carried a truth that changed everything, he said. Emily smiled softly. The truth was always there. The kingdom just needed someone to listen. Nathaniel looked at her with genuine respect. He had met many people who wanted to stand close to power, but Emily had never searched for a crown or a title. She had only followed what she believed was right. You showed this kingdom something it had forgotten, Nathaniel said. You showed us that being gentle does not mean being weak. Emily looked towards Silverwood Forest, where the sacred stag had returned. She thought about how different everything seemed now. The kingdom had changed because people were willing to remember. But deep within the ancient forest, the sacred stag left behind one final sign. A message appeared among the silver trees, revealing that the bond between Elder Grove and its ancient guardian had been restored, but the journey of the kingdom was still continuing. Emily and Nathaniel looked toward the forest, knowing that protecting the truth would require the same courage that helped them discover it. The past had finally been understood. Now, the future was waiting to be written. The morning light spread across Elder Grove, touching the ancient castle walls and the peaceful forests beyond. For the first time in generations, the kingdom felt truly connected again. The return of the sacred stag was not only a sign of restored balance. It was a reminder that the heart of a kingdom was never found inside a crown. It was found in the people who protected one another. Months had passed since Emily Carter first stepped into Eldergrove Castle carrying a forgotten message from Silverwood Forest. The Omega girl who once believed she would always remain unseen had become someone the entire kingdom respected. Yet Emily never changed the way she viewed the world. She still listened before speaking. She still searched for understanding before judgment. Those qualities were the reason the sacred stag had chosen her path. Inside the royal hall, Nathaniel Cross stood before the people of Elder Grove, not as a ruler standing above them, but as a leader standing with them. The Alpha King had changed in ways many never expected. He was still powerful. He was still respected. But now the kingdom saw something beyond his title. They saw a king who understood that true strength came from compassion and trust. A crown does not make someone worthy of leading, Nathaniel said. The choices we make and the people we protect are what define us. Emily listened quietly beside him, remembering the day she had first entered the castle. She remembered the uncertain looks, the doubts, and the voices that believed in Omega could never change the fate of Elder Grove. But the kingdom had learned an important lesson. A person's value was never determined by how others saw them. It was revealed by the courage they carried inside. Later that evening, Emily returned to Silverwood Forest one last time. The ancient trees stood peacefully beneath the moonlight, and the gentle silver glow of the sacred stag could be seen between the branches. Nathaniel joined her, leaving behind the responsibilities of the throne for a quiet moment of reflection. When I first became Alpha King, I thought my purpose was to be strong enough for everyone, he said. Emily looked toward the forest. And now? Nathaniel smiled softly. Now I understand that a true leader does not need to stand alone. The words carried a meaning deeper than either of them expected. Their journey had never only been about finding the sacred stag or uncovering forgotten history. It had been about discovering what the kingdom had lost and what it needed to remember. The sacred stag represented balance. Emily represented the courage to seek truth. Nathaniel represented the willingness to change. Together, they had helped Eldergrove begin a new chapter. As the seasons changed, stories of the Omega Girl and the Alpha King traveled throughout the kingdom. Children learned that kindness could be powerful. Leaders learned that listening was a strength. And the people remembered the promise that had guided their ancestors. The sacred stag remained in Silverwood Forest, watching over a kingdom that had finally found its way back to itself. Emily never became important because she stood beside an Alpha King. She became important because she reminded everyone that even the quietest voice could reveal the greatest truth. And Nathaniel never became a better king because he gained more power. He became a better king because he learned the value of understanding. Under the silver moon of Eldergrove, the forgotten promise was no longer hidden. It lived within the hearts of the people, proving that destiny was not always found by those who searched for greatness. Sometimes, destiny found those who simply chose to do what was right.